Alrighty. I think we are live and good to go.
Hello.
Awesome. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Freeplay 2018's first ever online session. Yay!
Woo.
Go team. So for those of you who may be a first-time free player, Freeplay is Australia's largest and longest-running independent games festival. We're running all week this week in Melbourne, Australia. So that's from the 22nd of May till the 27th. And we've got a weekend conference happening at the end of this week. So tickets to that are still available, and you can find it on our website at freeplay.net.au. And if you'd like to join the conversation on Twitter, you can use our hashtag, which is hashtag Freeplay18. There we go. So I am Pritika. I am the social media and community manager here at Freeplay. I am also a big fan of visual novels. So we decided to put together this panel about storytelling in visual novels. And I think it would be a good time for my panelists to introduce themselves. Who wants to go first?
All right. Yep. So my name's Barber. I have been working in games for maybe 4 years now, and I write in a lot of different types of game medium, but I first discovered visual novels back in the late 2000s when I was at uni, back when I was writing for JS Games, and I didn't actually get sort of motivated to make my own visual novels until more recently. And I've written a couple of VNs, I've written some twines, and yeah, I just love stories, and I'm not fussed about how I get them.
Awesome.
I'm Alison. I'm also known as Draz on the internet. I'm a recent graduate of RMIT of game design, and I'm currently an artist at Watercrest Studios, which Tristan here also is the studio director of. I've only really started creating visual novels quite recently, within half a year, but I'm already creating a lot of them because I do a lot of game jams.
Yay.
So I'm Adel. I wrote for The Letter, which is a Filipino horror visual novel. I'm in a strange place right now where I'm not really like making visual novels full time because I'm studying accounting, which is weird for a writer, I know. But it's, I really like visual novels, especially with how they're easy to they can represent minorities and LGBTQ, which mainstream usually doesn't. So visual novels are my jam, really.
Hey, my name is Tristan. I go by Wolf online. As Draz said, I am the studio director of Watercrest Studios. I've been making VNs for about 4 years now, and I've been running the studio for about 2.5 years. I've written for games like Our Home, which was 2017 NaNoRenO, and our Steam games like Fairly Well and Palinaris. And I got into VN Dev because I had friends that were doing it, and that's my favorite part about VN Dev is meeting new people.
Fantastic. Thanks so much for all of that. So we're going to go straight into the questions that I've got set up for everyone here. So first of all, what was the first visual novel that you played or interacted with or got to know that kind of got you interested in making visual novels?
Is it all right if I go first?
Yeah.
So funny story. We were preparing for the questions, right? So I thought back, what was my first visual novel? And then the title Swan Song appeared in my mind. And the strange thing is I remember nothing about it. When I looked up what the game was about, I realized I was so traumatized because I played it at a young age. And I erased it from my mind because of how traumatizing it was.
Oh, wow.
So that's interesting, Swan Song. But the one that really got me into visual novels was Saya no Uta, which is I think everyone knows that it's a Lovecraftian horror one. So I really like horror visual novels.
For me, I didn't really have like one visual novel that like got me interested in them. I have like a bunch that like together created like a real love for the genre. Like I can list off 5, and those big 5 would be Magical Diary, Hatable Boyfriend, Long Live the Queen, Solstice, and Cinders. And I think those 3 are my main influences. I myself only really started creating visual novels because I'm interested in interactive fiction as a whole, and because I knew about Renpai and I knew about visual novels, I thought, why not, give it a try?
Great.
Okay. Well, the first visual novel I ever saw was a game called A2, which is a very linear, traditional visual novel about a Asian American rock star whose father was a big orchestra director, and after his death, he sends his protege from China back to whip his orchestra back into shape, and the girl is sort of dragooned into it. And it's enemies to lovers game. It's got all the tropes you could wish for, as well as a bunch of stuff that I didn't understand because I was not much into classical music. But I just enjoyed it so much and it's really stayed with me. But I didn't get into making it until me and a bunch of people were putting together a Mass Effect fan game called Speed Dating on the Citadel. Now, I didn't end up getting off the ground for a number of reasons, but as it was being developed, I realized, oh, yeah, I can write this code. And, like, I hate coding so much. But it was relatively easy to put my writing into action. And so, and it was just so exciting to make a menu and have players be able to select from that menu and make a decision. And I love choice games. It's where I'm from. And yeah, it's just such a great tool for, even though that's perhaps a more Western approach to visual novels. Yeah, it's just such a cool way to do it. And it's low cost. It's just so accessible both as a gamer, but also as a game developer.
My first game is probably a lot of people in the audience is your first game. It was Katawa Shoujo. Most people have heard of what Katawa Shoujo is. And it got me into making visual novels because I found the subreddit, and like a few other studios, Watercrest came together on the subreddit. You know, a post was made there saying, hey, we could do this. Let's make a game as impactful to the reader as Katawa Shoujo. And probably about 100 of us got on into a TeamSpeak server and started working on games. Of course, most of them dropped out, but it was definitely fun trying to follow the footsteps of the other great EVN devs.
That's awesome. Everyone's got such interesting stories. I love it. So I think a few of you have already kind of touched on this next question, but all of us here are storytellers. So what is it about visual novels that draws you to telling stories?
Well, I like them as a vehicle for choice games. I actually came into visual novels sort of a little bit backwards in that I was already into playing big AAA games, and then I sort of came backwards to a simpler, cheaper way of getting to play a game. And you could think of them as like AAA games, but without all that pesky combat. So if you could just distill something like Mass Effect into its choices, you'd basically have a visual novel. So, for instance, dating sim. I adore dating sims. I love exploring all the paths to, get to the people I like. I love thinking about interesting ways to demonstrate affection that goes beyond the insert kindness coins mechanic.
Yeah.
But I love games that have really done something with this. Like if you've ever seen, there's a game called Tusks, which I've yet to fully play because I've been waiting for it to be released, and now I need to sort of sit and devote time to it. But in Tusks, you're a gay orc accompanying a whole bunch of gay orcs migrating their way across Scotland. And Mitch, the developer, worked really, really hard on making quite complex mechanisms for befriending people. So you don't just give a gift to one of your fellow orcs. You need to be friends with them. You need to be friends with their friends. You need to sort of have a wide variety of decisions so that it's as reflective as possible of real life friendships and alliances. You don't have to go that hard. I still occasionally enjoy a real chewing gum. Like my own visual novels, I made a visual novel called, my first one was a dating sim called Queen Cobra, where you were basically a gay superhero who wanted a sidekick and possibly with a side of romance. And literally you just interviewed a bunch of people who wanted to be the Robin to your Batman. And yeah, at the end you could reject them, but they could also reject you. And then my second one was the same character, but just a very silly heist visual novel about a missing diamond. It was extremely silly, and it takes you about 15 minutes to play, and you can go and get that from my website and decide for yourself how silly it is. But that was still a lot of fun because it's got a bit of a mechanic where you can sort of hypnotize people and reach into their minds, and you can get slightly different responses from them depending on whether you hypnotize them or not.
Great. Anyone else want to go into what draws you to telling stories through visual novels?
For me, it's because of how, like, you know, obviously a lot of storytelling is better, like, show not tell, but with visual novels, I think one of the cool things is just being able to blatantly say something that wouldn't make sense to come up in another game, which is why I am so drawn to them, because obviously, like, all of my games are queer in some way, and being able to downright say, oh yeah, this character is queer, this is their sexuality, this is their label, which is a really cool thing to do. And more recently, for the Queerly Represent Me Jam, I did a game which explored a relationship between someone who has autism and someone who doesn't, and being able to, like, really bluntly state, like, what someone's feeling in the situation and, like, how their mind works and, like, you know, how they, you know, what the situation is like for them is really appealing. And I don't think I could have really approached that in another way, like in another medium.
I think, sorry.
No, you go ahead. You go ahead.
I think what draws me to visual novels is, like, when you go with the general storytelling medium like movies, TV series, books, they usually focus on, like, the big picture stories or just the main character, right? But with visual novels, you can choose, like, who to interact with, who to focus on. If you're interested in a certain character, you can learn more about them by making the choices that would lead you to, well, interact more with them. You learn more about these characters and you get to paint them as people. It's great how most visual novels go beyond just making these characters just fictional characters. You can see them as real people, someone you might know, someone you might interact with. And when writing for the letter, one of the things I liked the most was writing the Luke and Hannah, right? Who are, at first glance, they're a rich, like, generic rich couple, very suity, very high society and all that. But as you play their chapters or as you interact more with them, you learn more about every part of their character. And I think that draws you more to them than it would usually do in any other medium.
Yeah, my favorite part about visual novels for telling stories is the fact that I get to work with musicians and artists who get to really bring it to life. Writing novels is really cool, and a lot of us are probably readers, and that's really cool. But it's not the same without the music and the art and the coding that goes behind it. And recently, working with voice actors, voice acting brings it to light, and I love voice acting so much. So beyond being able to tell the stories I want to tell, and representing the people I want to represent, and talking about certain issues that people experience in the real world, beyond that, working with a bunch of different people for the same passion project is my favorite part about telling stories in VNs.
It's such a collaborative experience when you get to work with others who all have their own skill sets that they're keen to bring to this one story. It can be really, really powerful. Yeah. Just touching on what you said, Alison, before, being able to tell queer stories, that reminded me of a visual novel that I played on my phone ages ago called A Story as Fate's Kiss. And that introduced me to, I think, probably the first ever non-binary love interest in one of these games. And there was no, as soon as you got in there, it was established that their pronouns are they, them. And I really appreciated that the pronouns were just there and the character accepted it. And it was really wholesome and new, and I really want more games to be able to do that. Yeah, I thought that was very special. So as we were talking about, and I think Tristan touched on this with, how it's a collaborative experience, how can visual novels get better at telling stories? Like, we all love it as a medium, but how can it do more? And are there ways that art or music can extend the writing or storytelling, or vice versa? Anyone have any thoughts?
Going back to the game that I did for Queer Representing, which is, by the way, called I Don't Have a Queue, one of the traits we wanted to have in the character with autism was that she tends to avoid eye contact. And to make this really be apparent, when it's from her perspective, the background and the character that she's talking with shifts away. So you're actually looking in a different direction, part of the background, and not having the character you're talking with be in focus. It's a pretty small touch in a very, the jam was 2 weeks, so we didn't really have, a lot of time to do it, but I quite like the way that it brings the story to life.
Definitely.
Yeah, definitely, the UI in particular can help bring you into the story. UI and other things like that, people don't tend to focus on. They see really nice sprites and music, and they think about that for VNs. But the entire experience, the coding that goes into it, and all the little touches and details really bring it to life. And beyond that, as I said before, voice actors, hearing a character voice some emotional lines and hearing someone say them out loud can really bring the emotions out, especially in heavy-hitting scenes. Like with Watercress's games, the most recent games have been dealing with mental illness in particular, and having voice actors that are really good at bringing out the emotion in characters makes it a better cohesive experience.
I think it's great that you touched on the UI, because it's true, not a lot of people, it's sad, but not a lot of people think about that, especially for first-time game developers or newer game developers. Again, they focus on the writing and really what makes, actually bringing the game together mechanically rather than tying it all together aesthetically. Yeah. Anyone else got any points or thoughts about that, or should we move on to the next question?
We got nothing.
That's all good.
Touch on the main points with the art. Yeah.
Yep. So what kind of stories do you want to be? Do you want to see be told? That was horribly phrased. What kind of stories would you like to see being told with visual novels? I think we already touched on more representation with mental illness and queer games as well. Are there any particular stories you'd like to see?
Romance with skeletons.
Okay, now I want to know, what's your pitch for that, Adel?
Well, see, there's the skeleton. They really. Wait, so seriously? I'm so sorry.
No, this is wonderful.
No, but seriously, I think more stories I'd like with visual novels, especially. Well, less high school stories, of course. I think those don't dominate the market so much, and more characters of our age, adults, so that we could relate a bit more. Stories of immigrants, of less represented races like Philippines, Thailand, Malaysians, and all that. I think stories from those kinds of people would be really interesting, since it's a very different point of view from what we usually see right now.
I would really like to see more representation from like Southeast Asia game developers being able to tell their stories, because there's a lot of culture there.
It's like so much culture in like one concentrated area of Asia.
Exactly.
I mean, one of the great things about visual novels is, even though they do tend to concentrate on dating sims or high school sims or cafe sims, there's nothing to stop you putting any kind of story you want. If you want to make Call of Duty Ghosts in a visual novel, you can totally do that. I can't imagine anyone doing it, but it is physical. So I accidentally made my main character Tamil. I have no knowledge of Tamils as a culture, but I called her Najapai. That is a Tamil name. I wanted to do so in my visual novels, main character is Tamil, and her romantic partner is Malaysian and sort of loosely based on your Penny Wongs and your Jenny Keys and sort of Asian silver fox ladies. And these are just because these are cultures that live in my world. Like every other person I encounter will be sort of from the subcontinent or from Asia. But I'm not the person who should be telling those stories. And the way I've done it is to just have them as superheroes, and they're just doing their superhero-y thing. And it would definitely be awesome to see stories actually by people from those backgrounds in English. So, yeah.
Yeah.
I'm personally quite I really want more stories that aren't just either romance or horror, because I think those are the two big genres that people usually go with visual novels, because your choices are either do I go with this character or this character, or do I avoid death by choosing this option. And I feel like there could be, more stories to explore with visual novel, where the stakes are just not dying or getting the right character. But obviously, there's such a wide variety of stories out there. I can't really give an example of what else I'd want, I guess. But yeah, I think there's a lot of possibilities that aren't as touched upon as I'd like them to be.
Yeah, I definitely want to see representation from any of the communities that you don't generally tend to see. We're working on a game about former criminals trying to rehabilitate, and like stories like that, which you don't really think about the struggles of being in that community. Like I want to see more representation of that stuff specifically.
That's a really interesting topic for a game. I really like that. Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I think there should be definitely more queer, people of color, minorities, and because it is a very accessible way of getting into making games, like we've all talked about Twine and Renpai, it's there for us to explore, essentially. It's really interesting with, like language barriers and stuff like that. I wonder how people from Southeast Asia, for example, could actually bring their stories over to the West, because I think there is that language barrier, unfortunately. But yeah, that shouldn't stop the stories being told. So going on to the next question, with visual novels, they have traditionally come from a Eastern background. Like a lot of them have come from Japan, and now it's kind of a newer medium in the West, relatively speaking. So do we think that many of the games take influences from Eastern tropes and what's already been done? Do you think we should continue to rely on these tropes, or should we focus on creating more Westernized stories?
I think it would be nice to see more VNs with more Western stories with less Eastern tropes, but I don't think it's necessary. I think that you should think that you have the option to move away if you want to, but if you want to tell stories with Eastern tropes, you shouldn't be frowned upon for that. Really, just make the story you want to make, tell the story you want to tell, no matter what tropes you use.
Also, a lot of those tropes actually do kind of have some mirrors in Western. Like, for instance, if you think about the tsundere, that's definitely a recognizable trope in Western stories. We just don't necessarily call it that. We have tropes like being adorkable, which probably map onto classic Japanese visual novels. So if you can make a game that's less tropey, great. But if not, I say lean into it.
I think I'm a bit biased if I'm going to say that we don't really need more Western stories in visual novels, because most, yeah, I know it's biased, but most mainstream games like AAA development, a lot of them are dominated already by Western stories like Mafia, Wild Wild West.
Absolutely.
There's always somewhere in Los Angeles or New York. It's very Western dominated. So I think visual novels are a chance for some of the less noticed Eastern cultures to shine, like I said before in the question before. So,
this is bias. I'm so excited about Necrobarista though, because like it's made by Australian Asians. So it's set in Melbourne, it's set in the West, but it's made by Asian devs, and I think that's pretty cool.
And the same can be said for Florence as well, which was a more puzzle-based game. Yeah. But that's absolutely what they did. Like the setting was Melbourne, but it was very much, an Asian culture. Like that's where all the influence was drawn from. Yeah.
Yep.
So I think seeing more nuance in culture rather than, like, again, if you want to lean into tropes, definitely do that. That can be a great way to introduce yourself to writing as well. But it's really, more nuance in stories and more stories that we are all living as well. Anything else from anyone?
I just want to bring up the point that, like, because, like, Renpai and Twine, those things are so accessible, it's not like someone telling their story or, like, a particular story means that someone else can't tell, like, another story, like a Eastern-based story doesn't negate a Western-based story. So I think, like, just let people do games and stories and stuff, really.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. Let people make the games that they want to make, essentially. Yeah. So I've got one more question, and then I might open it up to questions and comments from the little live chat that we've got going here. And I think this last question might be a really quick one because we've all touched on this already. But for those who want to get into creating visual novels, what are some tips that you've learned along the way and some resources that you'd suggest? Not necessarily game engines, but what have you learned, or where have you looked to for resources?
The visual novel community there's actually a lot of visual novel communities. Obviously, the big kahuna is Lemmersoft, and I know a lot of people have got a really good amount of information and support out of that. I would like to give a very big shout out to itch.io because it is such an easy platform to upload your game to. Very easy to work with. They take quite a small amount of your payment if you are charging. If you're giving your game away for free, that's cool too. Like, there really has never been a better time to just make a game and shove it out into the world. It's so easy.
Itch.io is so good. When you first get onto itch.io and first release games, you'll have a gigabyte limit, but that is a really easy thing to get over. Like, when we were making our 2017 NaNoWriMo game, we had our limit like 5 gigs or something, and the NaNoWriMo game was ending like in a couple hours, and it was like 3 in the morning or something, and we were like rushing on Twitter, like saying, please up our gigabyte limit. And like within like an hour, within like 30 minutes, they immediately messaged us, got onto Itch, and then upped our gigabyte limit to whatever we wanted it to be. Like, not only are they a very accessible platform, but they talk to the people who release on their platform. They're very active. They're always trying to improve things, and just all around, I love itch.io for real.
Anyone else? Are there any like devs that you've learnt from or anything like that?
Well, Snow McNally is presenting at some other Google Hangouts. Snow was strongly instrumental in teaching me how to put together a better visual novel, and to help. Because like when you come from Twines, I'd made a few Twines and they're a bit novelly. You can really be quite literary in a Twine, whereas a visual novel is more like screenplays. So basically, whatever Snow is on during Freeplay, go listen to it, go see it. Can't recommend enough.
Quick plug. Snow has got a Twine workshop happening. If you're in Melbourne, they're going to be hosting a Twine workshop on Thursday at Library at the Dock. So if you're able to make it there. I've also gone to one of Snow's workshops before and just like highly recommend. Such amazing advice.
Very good.
Yeah.
In terms of, go ahead. Sorry.
Am I allowed to use rude words? Because I've got a blog that I want to recommend a lot.
I would say if you just put in like, if you say content warning right now.
Okay.
Let people know. Yeah. Let people know.
Because it's not even that severe, but basically the blog is called Fuck Yeah Renpai.
Right.
And like, seriously, it's I don't think they've posted, their last post is a year old, but I found it really helpful in just scrolling through. They had lots of collections of links, games, free art, GUI assets. This is the other thing. I made my visual novels all by myself using free music, free art generators. I made the art, but I can't draw with a crap, so I used all sorts of generators. There's no UI because I was like, oh yeah, I'll make the UI, and then I quickly realized, oh wow, people specialize this and get paid for it, and there's a reason for that. So yeah, fortunately, Renpai includes at least a basic UI. It's not great, but it's functional. But yeah, highly recommend. Tumblr has lots of great resources of anything you could possibly want to do on a visual novel.
I do want to shout out Renpai in particular. Renpai Tom is the developer for Renpai, and he keeps it up to date all the time, and he has a Discord, and he personally is on his Discord constantly helping people who have questions about the system in general. And the documentation for Ren'Py, it's really good. Like, if you have any questions with Ren'Py, go to the documentation, and if you still don't have your issue solved, go to the creator. Not many engines have the ability to go to the creator directly to help with your situation.
Yep, it's amazing.
I think the best things about VNs are there are resources everywhere, especially like Barber mentioned before, Lemasoft.
Yeah.
People are always happy to help if you're starting off, if you're interested, if you're making a big project. I know there was Uncle Mugen on Lemasoft who was always making backgrounds that people can use for free. People are always happy to lend a hand when they can. It's a good community.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And like,
You go ahead.
So like unanswered topics and active topics, meaning that someone will probably be able to see your very new question. And like, I personally browse Lemasoft like on a semi-regular basis, so maybe I can help you.
Yeah, Lemasoft is great. I've gone there. I remember, I don't think it was NaNoRenO last year, it was the year before when I really got into like making a full-blown VN with a team, and I had so many UI questions and I just went in there, and basically all my questions had been answered for me already. There were so many tutorials, so I could just browse all the tutorials and take my time looking through them, and it was so good. Yeah. I am going to give a quick shout out to Christine Love as well, who has actually released entire documentation of a talk that she did. And I will put that on Twitter and in the live chat now, actually. There we go. Because that is an awesome. Oh, remove the web address and try again. I'll put it there later. There we go. I'll put it on Twitter. You can find it on Twitter. That is an awesome. Remove the web address and try again. I'll put it there later. There we go. I'll put it on Twitter. You can find it on Twitter. That is an awesome. Remove the web address and try again.
Barbara.
Is that my voice?
Who's echoing? What the heck?
I think it's Barbara.
Bob, I think your audio is coming through onto our talk.
Okay.
Bob, I think your audio. Oh, it's gone. Okay.
Okay, we're good.
Anymore. That was scary. All right. I will link that on my Twitter because apparently the live chat doesn't want that to be there for some weird reason. But it's basically a doc completely going through like how little bounces and slides and posture for different characters, how to visualize the script, how to finalize your UI, why that matters to finalize your UI first, and all that. And it's just an insanely great resource. Yeah.
Oh, this is from VNConf?
Yes.
If anyone here hasn't seen them, there's a YouTube channel that all the VNConf talks are hosted on. I've given a talk at both of the last two VNConfs.
Awesome.
And it's really good. A lot of different devs, including Ren'Py Tom with the first one, gives a lot of really, really good advice for them. Many of them have like slideshows that are linked there and other resources. I gave a talk on management and leadership. So if you need to look at how to manage a studio, let me know. Feel free to message me or look at my talk on VNConf.
That's awesome. I think KG, one of our devs from down here in Melbourne as well, did a talk. Was it last year?
I think it was the year before, because that's where I met him and got him to work with me. Yep.
Yeah. Awesome. So yeah, I am happy to open it up to questions from anyone in the live chat or anyone on Twitter as well. I will monitor that now as well. Yeah. Yeah. I just saw that Maze on Twitter has also plugged Ink from Inkle Studios as well. Has anyone used Ink before?
I've had a bit of a play with it, and also with Choice Script. They're not technically difficult to use. I'm not sure how friendly they are in terms of keeping all your ducks in a row. One of the things I liked about Renpai was that in my script there were several conversations that you could have. Like, there were literally 6 different characters that you talk to, and I was actually able to make completely separate scripts and call them in. And I don't know, maybe you can do that in Ink. Definitely investigate. It looks fearsome, but it probably isn't.
I haven't really used it, but I have had a glance at it, and I think the syntax seems fairly simple and easy to understand. Especially because Renpai is Python, so if you don't have knowledge in Python, maybe Ink would be better for you. Ink is also used and Twine. Those are the ones that you use if you want to use them in Unity. So if you're more familiar with making games in Unity, they might be a better starting off point.
When it comes to Renpai, it's mostly pseudocode. You don't really need to know Python for any of the stuff you would want. Like, if you're making a basic VN, you don't really need to know any Python at all. I am not a coder. I know nothing about Python, but I can script our entire game fine. Just look at the documentation. It's really easy. And it's really nice because GitHub and Atom are 2 things we should use. Like, GitHub is good to merge scripts and stuff, make the game itself with other developers, and Atom is like a special notepad that helps you with Renpai's syntax, and it color codes everything, and it's really nice. So I'd recommend both of those if you're using Renpai.
Awesome. These are such good resources. I love it. We got a question from Twitter from the user ToothSoup, Phil, who's going to be at Freeplay. Is there a list of notable VNs by Australian devs for us to check out and support?
Ooh.
Well, obviously there's Necrobarista.
Yeah. There's a whole bunch of stuff that Tin Man Games do. There's Miss Fisher's Murder Mysteries, which, yeah, is a lot of fun.
That gets is that a visual novel or not?
Yeah, true.
I mean, I think technically it is.
I would say so. One that is a few years older now, but is probably one of my favorites, is one that Snow McNally wrote a while ago, which was Little Witch Story. And that was written in, that was a Twine game, but it's probably one of my favorites in terms of representation and just in terms of the story. I really enjoyed that one.
There is one visual novel in development right now from an Australian developer called Cotton Candy Cyanide.
Oh,
they're making a sci-fi death game, I think, called Quantum Suicide, and I'm really looking forward to that because it's inspired by Danganronpa, which is great.
That is going to be such a good game. I'm very excited for it.
Speaking of Cyanide, Oro Cyanide, whose one half of Cyanide T is an Australian dev.
Yeah.
So you could consider games like Break Chance Memento to be Australian visual novels, I suppose.
I would say so. There's some, Cyanide T have done some very awesome stuff over the years.
I just wanted to put in a good word for Fox Lee. That's fox-lee.itch.io. I first discovered their stuff in the Gameware ages ago, which I think you would really enjoy. You can set your pronouns, you can name your characters. You can do actually quite a bit with it. and there was somebody else who was going to yell at me for not promoting them. Scream at me as to why I'm not promoting your game. I'm checking my notifications.
Shrinking pains. I just remember shrinking pains. I'm sorry, Sophie. I'm sorry, Sophie.
I feel like we've opened up a can of worms, and we could get all in trouble now because we're not going to remember all the great games.
Shrinking pains is hard going. I played through once and couldn't face trying again. But I think it's really worthwhile. It's a very hard hitting VN.
I've just got to say, Barb, I think good shout outs to Snow. We've got some people signing up to the workshop now, which is awesome.
Hey.
Yeah.
Done.
Yeah. All right. I'm going to touch on a couple of questions that are in the chat now. What titles would you... Oh, no, there's one from Maze. What do you use tools at Port Twine to Unity or things that other things that can scale easily for larger projects? What experience do we have with that?
When I made my visual novels, I pretty much just typed into Word and then just stuck it into the Python scripts. I have been using Yarn recently, which looks and feels like Twine, which I quite enjoyed because you can search on strings, you can tag you can tag each node, and so you can find, if you want to find every reference to a particular character, you can search like that and it'll highlight it. So that's quite useful.
Mm-hmm.
It's just that it wasn't for a visual novel, but I do know that Yarn is specifically designed to integrate with Unity. So but it was quite friendly to use.
Yarn Spinner was designed for Night in the Woods. So if you're looking to do a game around that scope, then Yarn will definitely work for you.
Yes.
Excellent. All right, cool. Going to the live chat. What titles would you recommend for those who haven't played VNs before?
Ooh, what should be your first VN? Okay. Something like Cinders is at least relatively, it's visually attractive, it's a story that you know. So, and it doesn't involve, I think, a lot of because I played Long Live the Queen and I played the demo and I just got really baffled because there's so many things to keep track of.
God.
Yeah.
It's a great game, but there is a lot to remember. Whereas something like Cinders it offers some choices, but it shouldn't intimidate somebody who's never played a VN. As I say, going back to my first game, A2 is free. It's wonderful. It's quite long, so you get good value, but it's also fairly simple and you can always understand what's going on. If you can actually read Chinese, you'll get more out of it than I did, but you don't actually need to, not understanding the Chinese text is actually part of the experience. In terms of first VNs, I loved Lady Killer and a Bind, but I'm not sure that you should start with that.
Yeah, that one's pretty advanced.
Dream Daddy might be a good one for new people.
That's very accessible.
Yep.
Yeah.
But I mean, most visual novels don't actually require you to have a hardcore understanding of formats or anything. You just literally. The question is, does the story engage you or not? Do you like the characters or not?
Yeah.
There's usually not that much to think about.
Yeah. I think for me,
if you want free, really cutesy, quite short VNs, I would recommend Nom Nom Nami on Itch.io.
Yes.
They do these the first visual novel I played from them was Syrup and the Ultimate Sweet, which is this really cutesy visual novel about this scientist who's creating candy and stuff. And it's really nice. And all the other games are similarly as cute and nice.
Romance detective.
Yeah.
If you want to feel for the English visual novel experience and a game from Dave's that came from across the world, Katawa Shoujo, the one I mentioned at the beginning, it uses a lot of Japanese tropes, but it is very much an English story, and it gets you a good idea for how VNs are, and you could branch out from there. So I would recommend that as well.
I think way back when I started with the Phoenix Wright series, the Ace Attorney series. So I mean, that's more puzzle based as well. Like it's interspersed with that. But as Barb was saying before, if characters are something that draws you to a game, that's what kept me going with the game. I got invested with the characters, and that's what I enjoyed. So I started off with Ace Attorney. Yeah. Let's have a look at Twitter again. Shout out to all the people who are using the Freeplay hashtag, by the way.
Especially Maze.
Yeah, Maze is amazing. I'm sorry, Maze.
Also, Rowan Crawford has been kind enough to give a shout out to Tin Man Games to be or not to be, which
yeah.
But everything I've heard about it is that it's fantastic. I absolutely adore Kate Beaton, so I definitely agree that you should give that a go.
Yeah. Speaking of Rowan Crawford, also submitted a question. Can you talk more about the differences between VNs and Twine games that Barb touched on, and the games of other systems like Ink and those of Tin Man? Do those games appeal to different players and developers, or do they mostly cross over?
Well, if you think about choice of games, I love choice of games. I'm a huge fan. And choice of games are more like straight up books that allow you to make choices. They're really quite close to reading a book. They're quite text heavy.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas a visual novel is much punchier, much more art based in its appeal, much more screenplay like. I mean, I think probably that the audiences cross over because obviously consume all sorts of story based games. But it's more about where is your head at for what you want to play right now. Like, are you willing to download what can potentially be quite a large game with lots of art and commit lots of hours to it? Or are you just wanting to read something on your phone on your commute? What are you wanting to do?
Yeah.
And it has a lot to do with the person who wrote the Twine or the visual novel, because it's very possible to create a Twine game that could be a visual novel if it had like more pictures and stuff.
Yeah.
But with other Twine games, you can't really port them over because they have a specific feel, and like a lot of visual novels are from first person, I would say, but a lot of Twine games are more from second person. So it's like you're doing this, which is like a very different feeling. And there are like games like with those. You love it, like actually with those we love alive, those like games like those are very like I wouldn't see them in a visual novel at all. Or something like Kristen Love, she's known for her visual novels, but I still quite love Even Cowgirls Bleed, which is a game where every time you click on a link, it automatically selects it for you, so you don't have a choice, and that's a really cool use of Twine. And like another cool thing about Twine is that it uses CSS, which allows you to like use it as a web page, and you can do more with that as well. So there are definitely similarities, but you can also create differences if you want there to be differences.
Yep.
Absolutely. We've gotten a really good question from Alexander Swords on Twitter. Would love to know what everyone uses to plan visual novels. Something like mind mapping or sticky notes or, sprawling maps on the walls. How do you go about planning something that, uses so much choice, essentially?
I'll tell you what not to use. Don't use Excel, because we used that before. It was a total mess. It was like a whole block of text That's
Yeah.
so hard to read. You have to pick one where you can easily see the branches
Mhm.
where they diverge and when they reconnect again. It'll just make your lives easier when you start writing the script and the text and the code. So actually, something like Twine would be good for mapping the choices and all that, and then you just port it over to whatever VN software you're using.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
I use a lot of whiteboards. Whiteboards are your best friend. Easily dry erase, done, got them. And for stuff on the computer, using Drive and their flowchart creator, I forget what it's called, but making flowcharts for choices, super good, especially when you can see the weights, the weightings behind the choices in terms of code, and keeping track of flags for your choices and everything. Using Google's flowchart function is really nice. Other than that, walls of text and making sure you keep your documentation. Don't delete any of your documents. Keep them saved, back them up, and make sure to refer to them often.
Well, to be honest, I just use exercise books and pens. That's partly somewhat linear nature of what I write. So, for instance, with my mystery one, I literally wrote down, okay, how do I do a mystery? Because I've never done a mystery before, and that's its own thing. So I just linearly wrote out, okay, this is the thing that happens. What are the confounding items that makes this a mystery? Like, why is it a mystery as opposed to everybody just saw the thing happen? And then what factors would lead you to suspect all of these people in this room right now? And then because I had the 6 different characters, I wrote their scripts separately. It's like, what would motivate this guy to steal a diamond? What would exonerate him from thinking that he'd stolen a diamond? It wasn't, there are not so many choices in that VN that I needed to use the kind of mapping that Twine, for instance, lends itself to. Having said that, I am currently working on my Epic Princess game, which will have all those links, and then I'm really going to need the whiteboard and the sticky note.
I think for me, in the past, I've used Post-it notes to plan things out and just get like because I used to have a giant free wall in my bedroom, so I used to mix and match them a lot. And then in terms of script writing and actually getting the giant blocks of text in, if you can afford it, Scrivener is a great writing tool. I bought it years ago when I was in uni. But basically, it allows you to split up everything into segments, so you can write your little chapters and you can separate your choices out as well, so you know exactly what which part of the script goes where. So that's always a good one to use. And they have a 30-day free trial, but the 30-day free trial doesn't actually go. When you start from day one, it doesn't. Go down each day. It only goes down every day that you use it. So yeah, that's a good one. Yeah. I think we might have to wrap it up as we've just gotten our 2-minute warning. But this was an awesome panel, and I'm really glad that you were all able to have a chat with us about visual novels. I mean, I personally love seeing how people create games and what they use and why they love the games, the medium that they're creating in. So this was awesome.
I just want to give a final big up to Cute Demon Crashes. Please.
Yes.
Oh yeah.
It's a game about sex and consent, but I'll defer to you, Alison, on asexuality. But the person who wrote it was asexual.
Yeah.
She needed 2 bottles of wine per scene. But it's just so beautifully written, and there is absolutely non-sex options available if you're just not into that. And it's just such a lovely game with lovable characters.
Yay. Yeah, I think we'll wrap it up. I think there's been a call on Twitter for us to tweet out any recommendations we've made over the course. So if we can do that, that would be awesome. But yeah, I'd just like to thank all of you. So thank you so much again for joining me. And thank you to everyone who tuned in. You've made this panel really, really amazing, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
Questions.
yeah, your questions were so good. And in about an hour, there's going to be another talk going on, and it is about escape rooms. So it's called Get In and Get Out Escape Rooms, and it's all about what makes an escape room and what influenced them. So tune in an hour for the next online talk.
Woohoo! Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
See ya.
Happy free play.
Woo.